Chapter 1. Arrested on her own street. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees as Maya Henderson pulled into her driveway. Still in uniform, the green t-shirt and badge on her chest marked her as a ranking officer, lieutenant, with 12 years of service and a spotless record. She had barely stepped out of her car when flashing red and blue lights appeared behind her. Two white officers exited their cruiser, hands resting on their belts. No greeting, no explanation. One of them called out sharply, "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." Maya frowned. "Is there a problem, officer?" "We got a call about suspicious activity," one of them replied. "You matched the description." "In this neighborhood?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "This is my house." "Step away from the car and place your hands where I can see them." She held up her hands slowly, clearly, trying to stay calm. "I'm Lieutenant Maya Henderson. I'm with the department. My badge is right here." She pointed to it. They didn't even glance down. "Could be fake," the taller one muttered to his partner. Then, without warning, he reached forward, spun her around, and clamped cold steel cuffs around her wrists. From down the block, a man in a dark suit stepped out of a black sedan. He started walking quickly toward them. Agent Leon Carter, federal investigator and Maya's longtime friend. But by the time he arrived, it was too late. She was already in cuffs. "Officers, that's a mistake," Leon said sharply. "She's a decorated officer. What are you doing?" "Stand back," one of them barked. "We'll sort this out at the station." "No, you won't," Leon snapped. "I'm with the Department of Justice, and this," he motioned to Maya's restrained form, "is unlawful detention." But the officers were already pulling Maya toward the cruiser. She didn't resist. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned, not just from anger, but humiliation. She had been arrested outside her own home, while in uniform, by men who refused to believe she could possibly wear that badge. As the cruiser door slammed shut, neighbors peered through windows, phones in hand. One of them was already live streaming. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She knew this wasn't just an incident. It was a beginning. Chapter 2. That badge doesn't mean anything. The ride to the precinct was silent. Maya sat stiffly in the back seat, cuffs still biting into her wrists. The officers hadn't read her rights. They hadn't asked questions. They hadn't even checked her ID beyond a cursory glance. Her badge sat on the seat beside her, ignored. The irony stung deeper than the metal. At the station, they marched her through the front doors like a criminal. Officers passing by gave second glances, some in confusion, others in disbelief. No one intervened. Not yet. She was placed in an interview room. Plain walls, a metal table, a buzzing fluorescent light overhead. She waited. 15 minutes, then 20. Finally, the door opened. Captain Willis stepped in, flanked by one of the arresting officers. He looked tired, irritated. "What's going on here, Maya?" he asked. She gave him a flat stare. "Why don't you ask your men? I was arrested in front of my house, in uniform, for looking suspicious." The officer beside him looked uncomfortable but defensive. "We received a 911 call about a person loitering near a black SUV. Matched her description. She didn't comply when we asked her to step away." "I did comply," Maya snapped. "I also identified myself. I pointed to my badge." "She could have bought that online," the officer muttered. Willis raised a hand. "Enough." He looked at Maya again, then slowly removed the cuffs from her wrists himself. "This should never have happened," he said quietly. "Then why did it happen?" Maya asked. "What made two officers ignore everything I said and slap cuffs on me in front of my own house?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood, smoothing his shirt. "We'll handle it internally." Maya stood too, rubbing her wrists. "Don't do me any favors, Captain. What I want isn't silence behind closed doors. I want accountability." "You're upset. Understandably." "No," she corrected. "I'm furious, and I'm not the one who made a mistake." As she walked out of the room, a few younger officers glanced at her. some curious, others ashamed. But no one said anything, and that silence told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't about one arrest. It was about a culture that had decided long ago which uniforms counted and which didn't. Chapter 3. The Media Twist. By morning, the headlines had already spun out of control. Armed woman in uniform detained after suspicious activity call. Badge-bearing suspect refused commands, taken into custody. No mention of Maya's rank, no correction, no apology, just a recycled press release crafted to protect the department, vague enough to imply guilt, sharp enough to spark judgment. Maya stood in her living room watching the news with her arms crossed. The reporter repeated, "Officials are reviewing whether the individual in question was impersonating law enforcement." Nicole, her younger sister and a civil rights attorney, paced behind her. "They're trying to get ahead of this, shape the narrative before the truth comes out." The truth was out there, Maya muttered. It was wearing a badge. Nicole stopped pacing. "You know what we have to do?" Maya didn't respond. Nicole stepped closer. "If you stay quiet, they win. They'll frame this like another misunderstanding. But if you speak out, on record, it forces a conversation they've avoided for years." Maya exhaled. "They'll call me angry, bitter, difficult." Nicole smiled grimly. "They already do. Might as well give them a reason." That evening, Maya sat for an exclusive interview with a local news outlet. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She stated the facts, clearly, firmly, and without apology. "I was arrested on the street where I live. I showed my credentials. I was ignored because I didn't look like the person they imagined should wear a badge." Clips from the live stream went viral overnight. Lieutenant Henderson badge. While black, this is what we mean. Thousands shared their own stories. Black lawyers mistaken for defendants, doctors for janitors, military officers for intruders. What happened to Maya wasn't rare. It was just finally recorded. The police department issued a second statement, calling the incident regrettable but lawful. Maya scoffed when she read it. Lawful didn't mean just, and regret didn't erase humiliation. She had worn that badge with pride. They had ripped it off with suspicion. Now, she would use her voice not to beg for recognition, but to demand reform. Chapter 4. Cold Justice. The official investigation began the following week. Internal Affairs called Maya in for questioning, not as a victim, but as a witness in her own profiling. The irony didn't escape her. The room was sterile. Two investigators sat across the table, polite but distant. "Lieutenant Henderson," one of them began, "we'd like you to walk us through the events of your arrest." She kept her tone level. "You've seen the footage. I was getting out of my car in uniform. I was handcuffed without probable cause. My identification was ignored, and I was treated like a suspect, not a fellow officer." The younger investigator scribbled notes. The older one glanced at her badge on the table. "And do you believe race played a factor in the officer's decision?" "I don't believe it," Maya replied. "I know it." Silence. They thanked her and dismissed her within 20 minutes. Outside the precinct, Maya spotted Officer Bennett, the one who cuffed her, chatting with a colleague near a squad car. He laughed, completely unbothered. He saw her, didn't flinch, didn't apologize, just stared like she was the one with something to prove. Nicole's voice echoed in Maya's head. "If you stay quiet, they win." So she didn't stay quiet. That night, Maya posted a statement online. "I wore the badge. I served with honor. But none of that mattered the moment I stopped fitting the image of who they wanted me to be. To the officers who arrested me, I was not a lieutenant. I was not a neighbor. I was not a citizen. I was a threat, because I was black and breathing in a place they didn't expect me to belong." The post spread fast. Former colleagues texted her privately, saying they supported her quietly. Others remained silent, afraid of risking their careers. But Maya was done playing by their rules. She filed a civil suit the next morning against the department, the officers involved, and the precinct captain who failed to intervene. The media pounced. So did the public. The department tried to discredit her, leaking portions of her file, questioning her emotional stability. But nothing stuck, because this time Maya had the truth, and the country had its eyes open. Not for the first time, but maybe for the first time in a while. Chapter 5. The Ones Who Stay Silent. Maya sat at her desk, the lawsuit papers stacked neatly beside her, untouched coffee cooling in the mug. Across from her, Nicole scrolled through social media updates, her face hard. "They're panicking," Nicole said. City PR team released another statement. They're calling it a learning opportunity for the department. Maya scoffed. They didn't need a learning opportunity. They needed decency. What hurt more than the headlines, though, was the silence. Silence from fellow officers she had trained with, shared shifts with, backed up in alleyways and domestic calls and armed standoffs. People who had once trusted her with their lives now wouldn't even send a message. Even her old captain, whom she'd mentored under, had gone quiet. The same man who once told her she was a damn good cop was now nowhere to be found. Nicole watched her carefully. "You okay?" "I expected backlash," Maya said. "I just didn't expect abandonment." The next day, she walked into a community meeting organized by a grassroots justice coalition. The room was full. Activists, teachers, mothers who'd lost sons to over-policing. Most of them knew her name now. Some looked at her with hope, others with skepticism. Maya took the mic without fanfare. "I was a lieutenant," she began. "I served 12 years with distinction. I believed in the badge, but it didn't protect me." She paused, letting it settle. "And if the system can do this to someone who wears the uniform, imagine what it does to those who never had one." A murmur spread. Heads nodded. "I'm not here for applause," she continued. "I'm here because change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the ground up." By the end of the night, people lined up to shake her hand. Some hugged her. A few cried. A teenage boy said quietly, "You make me want to believe in justice again." It didn't erase what happened, but it reminded Maya she wasn't alone. She never had been. She had just been trained to believe she was. Chapter 6. The System Fights Back. The department didn't waste time retaliating. 2 days after Maya filed her civil suit, her access to internal systems was revoked. Her department-issued laptop was confiscated. A formal review of her previous cases was announced, thinly veiled as a routine audit. Nicole read the memo and snorted. "They're trying to intimidate you, make you look unstable. Watch. Next week they'll leak something to the press." Maya didn't respond. She'd expected it. It was textbook. Still, it stung. Everything she'd built, her reputation, her rank, her credibility, was now being dissected like she was the problem. The media began to shift tone, too. One outlet ran a story headlined, "Lieutenant or Liability?" Questions surface. About Maya Henderson's conduct. It referenced an incident from 5 years earlier, completely resolved at the time, where she'd raised concerns about a fellow officer's excessive force during an arrest. Back then, she'd been labeled overly emotional for filing the report. Now it was being used to paint her as unfit. Maya stared at the article in silence. Nicole slammed her laptop shut. "You don't owe them silence anymore." "I know," Maya said quietly. "But it's not just about me anymore. If I crack, they use that to discredit every black woman coming up behind me." So she doubled down. She wrote op-eds. She spoke at law schools. She met with city council members pushing for policy changes around racial profiling and officer accountability. And then, finally, a breakthrough. One of the junior officers who witnessed her arrest anonymously leaked body cam footage to a journalist. The video was damning. Clear audio captured Maya calmly identifying herself, stating her rank and showing her badge. One of the officers responded, "I don't care who you say you are. Put your hands where I can see them." The footage aired across national networks. The public backlash was swift. Protesters returned to the station steps. The hashtag number sign Believe Black Badges trended for days, and the city could no longer hide behind silence. They scheduled a public hearing. Maya was invited to testify. Nicole grinned when she heard the news. "They just gave you a microphone." Maya nodded slowly, voice steady. "Good." Chapter 7. Testimony that cut through stone. The hearing chamber was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Protesters and supporters filled every seat. City officials sat stiffly at the long mahogany table, flanked by lawyers and internal affairs investigators. The energy was electric, part tension, part anticipation. Maya stepped up to the microphone, dressed not in uniform, but in a tailored black suit. Her voice was calm, controlled, but her eyes burned with the fire of someone who refused to be silenced. She placed her badge on the table before speaking. "I wore this for 12 years, she began, with pride, with responsibility. And on April 3rd, I learned that to some of you, it never meant anything." No one moved. "I was detained outside my home, while in uniform. I identified myself clearly. I was ignored. Why? Because I didn't fit the image that some officers still carry of what law enforcement is supposed to look like." The mayor shifted in her seat. "Let me be clear. This isn't about a misunderstanding. It's about a culture that assumes guilt before asking questions. A system that teaches its officers who to fear and who to believe." She held up her wrist, revealing faint marks still visible. "These aren't just bruises. They're a reminder that if I didn't have a platform, if I hadn't been recorded, I would have been just another story buried under paperwork and policy." A city councilman tried to interject. "Lieutenant Henderson, there are protocols." She cut him off, politely but firmly. "Protocols that weren't followed. Let's not pretend this was about policy. This was prejudice. And if it can happen to me, someone with rank, training, and credentials, imagine what happens to those without any protection at all." The room fell silent. She closed her statement simply, "I came here not for justice, just for myself, but to make sure the next generation of black officers won't have to survive the badge they've earned." Applause broke the silence. Some city officials looked uncomfortable. Others lowered their eyes. But the crowd stood, and outside, the pressure grew louder. Because now it wasn't just Maya's word. It was public record. Chapter 8. More than one story. The day after Maya's testimony, a ripple turned into a wave. Local news began interviewing former black officers, some retired, some recently resigned, who had their own stories of discrimination. One spoke of being repeatedly stopped by his own colleagues off duty. Another described being passed over for promotions despite accolades. A third revealed she left the force after being told she was too intimidating in uniform. Suddenly, Maya wasn't just a case. She was a catalyst. Civil rights organizations released statements in support of her. Protesters returned to City Hall, this time carrying signs that read, "Protect the badge, respect the person. Black in uniform equals still a target. Systemic means it happens over and over." But inside the institution, resistance thickened. Several senior officers painted Maya as a divisive presence. Whispers spread that she had made it political. A few even hinted that her lawsuit was motivated by attention. Maya heard it all, and she stood taller. At a university forum, she told a crowd of young cadets, "Don't confuse my conviction with anger. Don't confuse my demand for justice with disloyalty. I want this system to be better, because I believed in it. And it failed me." After her speech, a young black woman in uniform approached her with tears in her eyes. "I almost quit last month," she said. "Then I saw you on TV. And I realized I wasn't crazy. Maya nodded. You're not. And you're not alone. Her story was no longer about what had been done to her. It was about what was being revealed across departments, cities, and entire systems. It was about every silence that now had a voice, about every badge that had never been seen. And with each voice added to hers, the department's hold on the narrative weakened. Change wasn't coming quietly. It was coming, however, because she refused to stay quiet. Chapter 9. The settlement they didn't expect. 3 months after the hearing, the city offered Maya a settlement. A large one. Undisclosed figures. Lifetime pension. A press release calling it a mutual resolution. Nicole read the offer silently, lips tight. They want you to disappear. Expensive silence. Maya said nothing at first. She looked out the window of Nicole's office, watching people move freely on the street, unwatched, unquestioned. She thought about her neighbors who had seen her dragged away in cuffs, her academy students who still asked if she was coming back, and the mother of a young officer who'd told her, "You're the reason he didn't walk away from this profession." She pushed the offer across the desk. No. Nicole raised an eyebrow. Sure? They're offering everything but a statue. Maya smirked. I don't want their money. I want their reform. I want policy changes, training mandates, external oversight. And I want it signed into law, not into silence. Nicole smiled like a lawyer and a sister at the same time. Then let's make them sweat. The city didn't expect the rejection. Neither did the department. But Maya's refusal to settle privately drew even more public support. Petitions surged. Community boards passed new resolutions. Even state lawmakers began reviewing oversight policies in policing. And finally, under pressure, they caved. Not with money, with action. The mayor announced a full overhaul of the department's internal reporting system, new leadership in training and recruitment, community-led advisory panels, required body cam reviews in use of force and stop and identify cases, and most importantly, a zero-tolerance clause for racially motivated misconduct. Maya stood at the press conference, not behind the podium, but beside the community activists who had been fighting long before her. Reporters shouted questions. Lieutenant Henderson, are you returning to duty? She paused, then answered clearly. No. I'm not going back into that building, but I'm not walking away either. Then what's next? She smiled. Building something better. And for the first time in months, she felt weight lift, not because justice had arrived, but because she had forced it to. Chapter 10. The Badge Reclaimed. 1 year later, Maya stood before a packed auditorium at the National Conference on Police Reform. She wasn't wearing a uniform, no badge on her chest. But when she stepped up to the podium, everyone stood. The applause wasn't for a title. It was for a voice that refused to stay silent when silence was the easier choice. Some people ask if I missed the badge, she began, scanning the audience. What they don't understand is, I never lost it. They just stopped seeing it. She paused. They saw my skin, not my service, my presence, not my rank. And they reminded me that in this country, wearing the uniform doesn't always mean you're protected by it. The crowd listened in stillness. I didn't fight to get my old job back. I fought so that no one coming after me has to lose theirs just to be treated like a human being. Outside the building, a mural had just been unveiled. Not of Maya in cuffs, but of Maya standing with her arms crossed, badge in hand, and the words, "You can strip a title, not a legacy." Young cadets took photos with the mural. Activists posed beside it. And across the country, black women in law enforcement sent messages like, "You made room for us." Later that evening, Maya walked through her old neighborhood. She passed the driveway where she had once been arrested. The street was quiet now, familiar. A neighbor watering her plants called out, "Lieutenant Henderson." Maya smiled gently. Just Maya now." "No, ma'am," the woman said proudly. "Once a protector, always a protector." She walked on, not toward a police station or podium, but toward a future she'd helped rebuild. One where justice didn't depend on the uniform you wore or the assumptions others made. The badge they refused to see. She never needed their permission to wear it, and now the world finally saw it too.